work. Yep, that's working. Okay. So I might just mute everyone. And then if you've got a question, you can unmute yourself then, and we'll go from there. Okay. Where's me? I'll just share the picture that we're going to be just bear with me. Where is it? Okay. Nope, it's not going to work. Okay. Okay. So we're going to be looking at the Artistic Digitizer program. So this is our first tutorial. So what I'm going to do is go over some of the basic background information in regards to what things are, where they are, and that sort of thing. Then one of the easiest sort of tutorials to introduce yourself with the software is using the built-in artworks that come with it, because there is a whole series of artworks. And because it's very user-friendly, it does make in your first lot of digitizing a bit more successful. So like in previous softwares that we've gone through, it's been a bit more advanced. So whereas this one's more of a real consumer base, so it's a lot easier to use. So what we're going to do, is go through all that. So we must get started. Okay, so let me just change screens. Where's my little video thing? Okay, so in front of you, you should have the software open on my screen. Can everyone see that? Just a nod? Yep. Okay, and let me just change this control. So there we go. So we should be able to see the mouse a little bit clearer now. Okay, so what I have done is I've opened up my software, and this will be the screen that you always see when you open it. I've changed, so you can see here my recent. So this is all the stuff that I've used. If I click over here, there we go. So normally it comes up with the icons of all the patterns that you open in the software. If you want, you can change it. So this little fella here is what we're going to be working with today. So he's one of our little built-ins. So it's a basic standard embroidery with a couple of layers in it. So I'll give you a bit of definition. So we'll talk about that. Over here on the left-hand side, you've got your basic icons at the top. So you've got file, open, so you can go new, view, so you got your toolbars. If you lose your toolbar, so sometimes if you go into the software and you can't find it, you need to come out and make sure that you've got your toolbars selected. So you've got options as well. So this is where you'll find if you want to change from inches to millimeters, you've got that option here. Tools. So I work, when I'm digitizing, I work with the Genome Digitizer tool. So it depends on if you've done digitizing in the past, B, and what's your preference of mouse control, I guess is what it refers to. So the Genome Digitizer, the reason I use it is it allows me to use my left click and my right click with my mouse. So it will give me like corners and curves is the easiest way to put it. Monitor, so depending on your size of your monitor, you can go in and set your monitor and everything with it. This is I don't usually worry about it too much with mine, depending on your screen size. If you've got a smaller screen, you might find that you might have a few issues and you might need to adjust it. Same with view. I don't usually worry about it because my text, I'm happy with the size of my icons and all that sort of thing. Printing, I leave it as it is because I don't have an issue in worry in regards to when it prints sizes and things like that. Your color palette, so you've actually got a whole series of different threads that you can use. You can pick your default settings, so you can see here my default setting is on Janome. If you've got, say if we go up the top to, if we go to RA, it's here somewhere. Let me see if I know my alphabet. So you got your RA options. So Splendor, which is your Wonder Fill, and that sort of thing. So you can go through and set them if you want. Sorry about that. Okay, and custom hoops. So if you can see here that I created a custom hoop that wasn't in here. So they're your options. You've got your help. So with your help's really good. The actual help book with this one, I have actually printed it out and it's huge. So you can always do that as well, and you're welcome and that sort of thing. Okay, so when you first open the program and you're wanting to start with an embroidery, depending on which machine you've got and your hoop. So you've got here, you've got Janome, and at the moment I've got MemoryCraft 15,000. So if I click on that, it'll bring me up my hoop options. So you can see here with my machine, I've got the SQ14 and all my hoops are there. If I've got a Janome and I've got a different machine, you can click on your drop-down menu. It will give you all your lists of all your different machines. So the Atelier 9 is, I think it's Europe off the top of my head. So it's a Janome, but it's instead of Skyline in Australia, they've renamed it. So there's a whole series of different machines there. If you have a different brand, you can actually choose a different brand. So you actually have all your different brands over this side. And you've got your cutters here as well. So the version we're using is our Digitizer Full. It's not the junior version. The junior version won't bring up your cutters options down the bottom. So you can actually incorporate your cutter in this software and just use the one software if you want. This one, so when they brought out the cutter software and this one, it's brought out by the same people. This one's just more advanced than the cutter software. So you got more options with this. So when I'm doing class, like tutorials and things like that, I use the software that supports the cutter. But if I'm actually creating something that I want to use with the cutter for my personal self, 9 times out of 10, I use the digitizing software as opposed to the cutter one. Okay. Okay, so we've got our machine. For our test sample, we use the 15,000 and we use the SQ14 hoop. So if you click on that, it brings it up. Your next option is your fabric. So we click on that one. You can see how it brings out a whole series of different fabrics, and you've got embroidery categories at the top here. So your embroidery categories refer to your type of embroidery. So we're just doing a standard embroidery like you'd purchase. It's not a cut work embroidery. It's not creating 3D embroidery. It's just a standard embroidery. So you click normal for that. The other thing with the software is, okay, so we've selected normal. It works on a mathematical equation inside the software. So it actually automatically adjusts like stitches, densities, and things like that according to the embroidery you've chosen, and the fabric that you've chosen with it. So in previously, you needed to know a bit more in the background information in regards to digitizing, whereas this software that they've brought out, it takes all that away. So that's why I was saying before how it's a little bit more user-friendly. It takes all that hard guesswork. So in the past, if you were doing an embroidery, you would test and test and test and test and test and restitch, whereas it's taken a lot of that information that you would have gathered in those test samples out and automatically put it in the program. So by clicking cotton, so cotton is our homespun. If you were doing denim, you could do denim, linen, that sort of thing. So as we go through and digitize out our design, if we have it on linen, it would be slightly different result in regards to our underlays and things like that, as opposed to working on a denim or a microfiber. So this is just a bit of background information that the reason why they've done it, I guess. So you click cotton. You can change the color if you want. I don't usually worry about that too much. And okay, so that brings that back in. Okay, so you've got create new. So if we were going in and starting, if we downloaded our own artwork, we'd go create new. But we're going to use some of the built-ins. So we're going to go browse. So the reason we're going to go browse is it will actually allow us to view our information. So you can see here, it's brought up the last folder that I was in. So this was our embroidery folder that we worked on the other day. So to go back and find the built-ins, so you'll find this too with the software, and it works across all softwares, is that when you open it into a certain folder and close it down, when you reopen the software, it will automatically take you back to that space where you were in the previous time you opened it. Okay, so to find our built-ins, we need to go to, they will be in, so we go our C drive, into our users, and we're going to go back to Katrina. Sorry. So with our users, it will be whoever your computer is set up with. So from our, where are we? So from this one, we then go into, where are you? Documents. So double click on our documents, and we find the folder. There we go, embroidery designs. Artistic digitizer samples. Okay. Just put that away for a moment. Okay. So you can now see on the screen, we've got a whole series of images on here. So these images you can see are a CMX image. Oh, pardon me. So what that actually means is they are vector files. So when you're working with your artworks, you will have either a vector file or you will have a bitmap file. So your vector files are the actual graphic in it is built on a mathematical equation. So what that actually means is that as you increase and decrease it, the actual design or artwork, the mathematics inside the build of that will actually increase and decrease. As opposed to a bitmap, it works on pixels. So when you increase it, sometimes you'll find that you get images and they go real boxy. and that's your pixels. So with your pixels, it's usually your JPG files. Yep. So which is your normal ones that you find on the internet and things like that. Your vector files are what falls under that would be, your most common would be your SVG files. Your, what else have they got? Your EPS files and the CMX files. So what that means in regards to this software is that when you bring them in, the software actually uses its maths behind in the workings of it and automatically digitizes everything for you. If you're using your bitmap files, you've got another process where you can trace it and automatically do it for you, or you can manually create it. So if you're working with your SVG files, you get a better result. So automatically do it. The mathematics works together and they're easier to use. So that's the reason why we're starting with our built-ins on this, is it's one of the easier ways to digitize your own design to start with. So what we will do, so these are all our little ones that we can play with. So as you can see, there is quite a few. And we're going to go down until we find 00217. There he is. And we're going to double click on him. So when we double click on him, you can now see that he has literally automatically came in as an embroidery design. So that's what I mean by with the vector files. So your SVG files, if you automatically bring them in, they come as an embroidery because this is a digitizing program. I have had questions in the past in regards to incorporating it with Cutter, where they've brought in an SVG and it's automatically converted it to an embroidery design, but they actually wanted a Cutter design. So then you can actually go through and manually convert it to a Cutter design. So the reason that it automatically does it is the first line, well, the top, I guess, preference of what this program is a digitizing program. So it automatically wants to create an embroidery design. Okay. So as you can see, he's brought him in. So if you wanted to, you could go through, you could stitch him out, send him to your machine now, stitch him out if you want. But as you can see here, if you look closely, as much as it's a high, powerful computer program, it's still not as powerful as our brains. So things like you can see here, there's a jump stitch between them and things like that. Well, we know personally when we take it into our embroidery machine, we don't want that. So there's a few little tweaks we still need to work with to get it where we want to be. So what we're going to do, first of all, if I just zoom you out, and so as you can see on, center him up a bit. Okay, as you can see here, I've just got my grid squares. So my grid squares may be a little bit different to yours. What I have done is I've gone through and set up my grid my grid squares at 10 mils apart, because the 10 mils actually represents our grid templates on our Janome embroidery machines. So I work very visually. So I know that now I can get out my grid and go, okay, well, I know that's X, Y, Z squares. That's how big my design is. So that's why I've got it set up like that. The other thing I have turned off is my hoop. So if I go up to view and click hoop, if I zoom out now, you can actually see the visual size of the hoop. Okay. So you can see he's actually quite little. I want him bigger. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our edit and we're going to go select all. So when we select it all, you can see that it comes up with a blue line around it to show us that we've got it all selected. And when we do that, you can see that it comes up with our sizing up here. So we've got our width and our height. Sorry. We've got our scale. We've also got proportional. So you can see here I've got my proportional ticked. What that means is that whenever I change my height, my width will automatically change in proportion to the size that I've changed, and vice versa. So if that's not ticked and I change the width, the height will stay the same. So he'll be out of proportion. So as you can see here, he's only 80 mil, so he's only 8 centimeters, so he's actually kind of little. I'm going to make him bigger. So if you just click on that, I'm going to take him up to 130 mil wide because I'm working with 140 mil hoop. And I'm going to press enter. So if I just use my arrows to zoom and center him, you can now see that he fits a lot better in our hoop. The other thing you can do, just move that out the way. Okay, up here where it says so I'll say to whichever machine you've got selected. So 15 is what I've got selected. If you click down your drop down menu, you can actually see that it says center to hoop. So if you press that, he is now centered directly in our hoop. Okay. So now what we're going to do, if we zoom in, I'm just checking my notes. Okay. So the next thing in regards to, especially when I digitize, we've got our sequence over the side here. So you can see he's all grouped. You can see you've got 1-9. So there's actually a whole series of different layers in your embroidery in there. So it's on auto at the moment. Whereas, so if we go up here and click on manual, you can now see that it's broken the design apart. And you can see we're in all our colors. So we're in our colors at the moment. If you click on it again, it takes it back to our design aspects of it. So you can change between the two. Okay, so it's now split that up into all our different layers in our design. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do now, so if I just scroll down through here and click on this one, you can see that it's bringing up the two together, and then there's that jump stitch between it. And then if we click on his eyes, it does the same. The other thing is if we come down here to number 8, you can see that it's still got his eyes and his whiskers grouped. So to make changes in that, because we're going to make some changes, we need to break them apart. So we're going to start by breaking them apart. So if we go with this one to start with, you can see he's got his eyes and his whiskers here. If I zoom out, you can see those areas are selected because they've got the purple on them. So we're going to right click with our mouse and select break apart. So now if I zoom out and have a look in our sequence, you can now see that they've all broken apart. Whereas before we had the eyes and the whiskers all together in one box, they're now all broken apart. So if we click off and then we come in here and we click on his eye, you can now see that they've broken apart. So the other thing we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to do that. About now. We're going to break apart all our pieces. Okay. So just go through our sequence. So here's another one. Zoom in, right click on our mouse, break apart. So you can see as we've broken that apart, those jump stitches are now disappearing. So we're going to go through. Yep, okay, so everything's now broken apart. So if we zoom out, okay, the next thing we're going to do is see here, this one here, number 2, where we've got, you can see the cutout of his eyes and the cutout of his, like his cheeks and that sort of thing. This is good. The cutout's good to have if it's quite dense embroidery, but what I would like to do is I would like to actually have that as a full base embroidery, and this part then stitches over the top, so it actually gives it a bit of dimension to our embroidery. So what we're going to do is we're going to go edit, select all, so we've got them all selected. We are then going to go up to our properties on our right hand side here, and you can see it says remove or overlays, and we're going to go never. So you can now see when we click off that it's a full embroidery background part now. So that actually this will add dimension to our embroidery. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do with the design is this part here. So remember, we're working with a built-in artwork. So sometimes you will find that there will be little bits and pieces that you're not quite happy with, or haven't converted quite properly from the design artwork to the embroidery design. So for example, you've got one here. So I've clicked on number 1, and if I come in here, it shows you where the embroidery actually comes. So you can see here that it's actually sitting underneath. So in our stitch out, it'll stitch these dots out and then it'll stitch that over the top, which is not what we're looking for. So we're just going to go and delete that. Okay. So all we're really doing is going through and just doing some tidying up. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is, you can see here when he stitches out, he's going to stitch on that angle. And when it does this, and you can see down here, sometimes you might have a few issues with gaps and things like that. So I'm going to change our stitch angle. So we're going to click on our background because that's the one that we want to change. We're going to go over here to stitch flow. And then I'm going to hold down the left click on my mouse and draw a line straight down. So now, if we zoom in, you can see our stitches are going up and down. Okay. So another area that you can use this for is, see his little fangs. I shouldn't say that, they're actually more teeth. If we leave this the way it is, it will come down here and it will stitch around like that. And if you see this one, he stitches it on a real weird angle and it's more of a curve. So we don't want that to appear on our stitches. We want a nice smooth stitch. So if we click on it again and we come over to our properties, you can see that it's going to be a satin stitch, which we want the satin stitch because that's going to give it a nice smooth effect over the top of our first layer of embroidery. We're then going to go stitch flow and we're going to draw our line across because this is the way. So we're drawing the line the way that we want our stitches to flow. So as you can see, as I make these changes, the stitches are then changing with it. And the other thing I want to do with it is I'm going to change the color. So I've come down here to the color tab in our properties and we're going to change the fill. So the fill represents the actual fill stitch, not the stitch around the outside. So if we did outline stitch, you can see now that it's come up with an outline stitch. We don't want an outline stitch. We just want our fill. So we're going to change our fill to white. And we're going to repeat that on this one. Okay. So I can see there, let's get this out the way to start with. So you can see that I'm putting a lot of little lines in. You don't just have to do one, you can do as many as you like. So I've still got a few. By zooming up here, like that. So I've got a little bit of an issue going on here, but that is because I've noticed that these are still all together. So we're going to break them apart. So I missed one before. There we go. So that reset that. Let's do that again. So how's everyone going so far as I work through this? Any questions?
I have lots, Katrina, but I just I'm learning heaps.
That's good to hear. Like I said, I'll send out notes and the link. You can watch the video as many times as you like. So yeah. Well, I thought you've been. I know that you've been watching the ones online, so I thought I didn't want to go too basic.
Because there's so many things in this that are sort of different. To me, I was thinking last night, this is a real auto digitizing program because I was trying to create a red work from just a JPEG.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm starting to think that might have been a problem. I was using a JPEG when I probably should have used a vector. So I don't know.
I will go over JPEGs later on in different tutorials. But yeah, the sticking with the vectors is sort of easier because it does most of the
I'm
work for you.
playing with different things to sort of get the hang of it. So
Yeah, and that's all you can do is have a play, stitch it out, have a play, stitch it out. Um,
yeah, I've got to do a bit more stitch.
okay, let me have a look
I
here.
minimised the video.
You're
I
cutting out.
minimised it so I could see the screen.
Yep.
Uh,
Okay. Let me have a look here. Okay, so let's just center him up a bit. Okay. There we go. So we've got him. Okay, so we've changed that. We changed that. Let me check my notes. Stitch flows. Yep. Oh, yep. Okay. So if we sent it, oh, so yep. You're right,
with
Sharon.
the jump
Yep.
stitches, because you
Mm-hmm.
broke those apart, so that gets rid of the jump stitches that way, does it?
Yep.
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 Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just saw the video and they did it totally different. It wasn't working for me, and I was like,
Yeah, you can
there you
adjust.
go. That's easy.
You can also adjust the like the length of it as well. So when it like between, so if I come in here, you can set up that. So if this is 2 mil between here, you can tell the program that you want to set up anything larger than 1.5. It will tie off and go to the next embroidery like design area. Sorry, Karen, you're cutting out, Sharon. Hello.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Yeah, so you can actually do other bits. You can do other bits as well. So, but that's one of the easiest ways. So by telling that to break apart, you're also telling the auto part of the software that then it will lock off for you and start over at the next area. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So if we have a look at our sequence, you can see here that if we sent it through to our machine now, so actually if I go over to redraw, because that, so slow redraw over here shows you what it will actually stitch out like when you send it through to your machine. So if I just increase my speed, and then we go start, so I'll show you how it actually stitches out. You can see here we've got white, grey, purple, and then white again. So if we go back, what that's telling us is that when we send it through to our machine, stitch color 1 will do this, stitch color 2, stitch 3, stitch 4, and so forth. So if we send it across now, this is like when we're talking about the auto brain, I guess, in the software, as opposed to our human brain, we know that if we send that across to our machine now, we're going to have 20-something color changes. And we don't want 20-something color changes. We want to break it down to make it as simple to stitch out as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of changes. So I want to change his mouth to a different color. So if I just mute. So I've selected the area I want to change. And then I'm going to change my color to tangerine. So what I'm doing is I'm creating depth in my embroidery. So when you look at something, so when I look at a cat, you'll see that he will have depth because there's shadows involved when you look at someone. So it's a real photography type thing I'm bringing in now. So by changing a slight variation in these two colors through here, you're giving depth to your embroidery. The other thing, so at the moment he will go main part of his head, his nose area, he'll go up to his ears, so he's white through here. Then we've got sort of grey in his eyes, and then we go down to this part here. So his eyes, I want to change to white. So okay, so we then should all have, make sure they're all in white. So now when he goes through, if I zoom out, when we send it to our machine, it'll stitch that section out and then that section out. And then you can see down here, that's where we start with our little bits. And then we've got our fangs as well. So you're still going through that layering of this color change, so color change 1, color change 2, and so forth. So we still want to break it down a little bit. I'm going to change this little part here in the satin stitch. I'm going to change that to a dark sepia. And then I'm going to change these little freckle type pieces. They're actually, I think they represent the rest of the whiskers. We're going to change those to the brown as well. So they are all over the place. So you can see here I've got one, but then it jumps down to his tooth. So that's because when we broke it apart but didn't organize itself into the different levels. So we need to bring this one here, which we're going to make a brown, but we need to bring him down. So if we hold that down and just drag it between 10 and 11, you can now see it's down grouped with all the other ones. So at the moment, if we leave him here, he will stitch one there. He will then jump over to this position and then over there. So we still have, we come down and find, where are we? Okay, so that's 19. So if I come in here, so we need to bring him down, all the way down to above the 19 position. So if we bring him one more. So you can see now in our sequence of stitching that it will go from that part, that design, to that circle, and then to that circle. So we now have those circles in the correct sequence. And now we're just going to go through and change the color. So I've selected one, but we won't change them all together. So hold down your control on your keyboard and you can see I can group them. And as I group them, you can see on the screen, they're getting highlighted. So that's all of them. And we're going to change that to a brown. So you can now see that I've changed it. And you can see now by changing those colors a little bit, you're getting more depth in the design. You're getting a more, the design, I guess, is nicer, more appealing to the eye as well. The other thing that we're going to do is on his eyes, you can see that they're like a blue. You can also see here, he's got one whisker here, and then he goes up and does his eyes. And then we come down to the rest of the whiskers. So that's kind of odd. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up this one and bring it down. So what this means is by moving these around in your sequencing, it's not so much an issue with our new embroidery machines because they do go through and they do our tie-off stitches and then jump stitch over to our new position. But in a lot of the older machines like the 350E, they didn't do the tie-offs. So when you had a lot of older designs, you probably remember back where you had all these jump stitches going backwards and forwards across your design. So by resequencing these, this just helps eliminate all that sort of stuff. So we're going to go through and we're going to change those to black as well. So come over here to our colour and change them to black. Okay, so if I zoom out, so you can see by changing the colour in his design, you've really changed the aspect of the actual design completely. And then in our sequencing, so you can see now if we go to our redraw and we change that to 2000, just to speed it up a bit, you can see we've still got a white down here and then a brown. So that means that when we send it to our machine, you'll have one color change to there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you stitch through, and it shows you how he does all these little underlay, and then back over the top. So you can see here, when we changed that stitch flow, we changed it so he's now stitching up and down. So things like your stitch flow will give you different variation in your embroidery designs. Your stitch flow can actually give you your shading effects in your designs as well, which then gives you dimension in your designs. So there's a lot of little things going on, I guess, in the background. The best thing you can do is when you're learning is just to watch your machine, the way it stitches out, and you'll see that the flow of the stitches and things like that and how they affect the actual design. So when we were talking before about how we changed the layering and we didn't want that cut out, so you can see now that that stitch is going to come over the top, so that is actually creating dimension in your design, so it won't sit flat, so it'll give you a bit more dimension. So you have those options that you can actually change all that sort of stuff and change the. So you can now see that these are going to stitch together, whereas before we stitched there and then it came down to do some stitches over here and then we were going backwards and forwards. So I don't know about you, but when I do my embroidery, if I pull up a design that's got 15 color changes, it's like, really? So this is just making things a little easier. So you can see here, he's going to come through and then we still have a bit of white through here over the top and then brown. So we've got brown there, we've got white, and then we've got brown. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go back here and we're going to pick up our circles again. Actually, this is going to be easier. We're going to pick up our 2 teeth and we're going to move them down below our circles and remove one more of our color changes in there. So we move them there to like that. There we go. So now when we stitch them out, we're stitching them together. So we've taken that color change out of there. So that's one less time we have to change our threads on our machine. Okay. And then we come down here. So we've got our eyes. So just bear with me and I'll see if I can bring this up. Where did I put him? Okay. So can everyone see him on the screen? If I've worked this right, can we see our stitch out, or have we still got... Oh, hang on a sec. There we go. So we should have our stitch out of our cat in front of us now on our screen, if I did it all correctly. Yep. So you can see here, when we stitched him out, that's what he stitched out like. So this was our first stitch out on our changes. So that's pretty good in regards to like creating stuff. You can see here that there isn't a lot of issues with, like, you can go back through here. I didn't break these apart, so you've got the little jump stitches in here, and I haven't gone through and adjusted the lengths and things like that. That's more a bit advanced, nitty gritty. So for a basic one, this is all pretty standard. There's a little mark here that I saw when I stitched out. So if I go back to my software, change screens. There we go. Should be back in our software. That's because it's an all-in-one through here. So if I click on that area, you can see it's an all-in-one part. You can break it apart. The other thing you could do would be you could change your stitch angle a little bit on it, like so, just to give you a bit more. All those little features like that can actually have an effect on how it stitches out. Okay. So if I bring you back to the center. Okay. So the other thing on here, so if we go down the bottom here, you can now see, what's that one in? I've just got an additional color. Let me see where it is. So what I'm doing here is I can see if I hover over here, I've still got, this is what they refer to is the actual artwork color, and this is your embroidery stitch color. So because there's an artwork color and there's an embroidery stitch in white, when you send it through to your embroidery machine, it will come as two separate colors. So I want to link those two together. So I just need to find, there it is. Yep. We want to find that one. So if we click on all our whites and just check. So all I'm doing here is clicking on these and checking that they're all the same color. There it is. So the little centers in the eyes, we're going to change to that one and that one. There we go. So we've now broken down our color. So when we send that through to our embroidery machine now, and we click on our little icon on our machine, it will tell us that we have 5 colors in our design, not 6. So it's just little little cleanup things like that. Okay, so down here, your bucket refers to your design fill. Your pencil is your outline, but we haven't got any of our outline selected. The other information is there is 34 items, so there's actually 34 separate embroidery designs stacked into each other to create the one. We've got our sizes. So you can see here now we've got our 5 colour changes and we've actually got our stitch count as well. So it gives you all that information. You can then go through, do our slow redraw. You can see here now that we've got our changes. So if you wanted to change it down to another colour change, you can actually bring them down. So at the moment you would have, so if I go back there, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you'd have 7 colour changes in that. If you wanted to bring it down to 6 colour changes, you could then come up here, pick these fellas up again and drag them down to the bottom. So then we go back to our slow redraw. We've taken out that colour change in between our brown and our black. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're down to 6 colour changes. Okay, so the next thing to do would be to save him. So when you save your designs, you can see I've saved him before. So pick a name. What's today? So I usually put in the name and then the date, because you end up having cat 1, cat 2, cat 3, cat 4, cat 5, cat 6, cat 7, etc., etc., etc. Whereas, if you put in the dates, it separates it and gives you a bit of... the other thing down here is our formats we can save it into. Now, I always save my originals in our draw file. Your draw file is your working file. So then if you come back, that allows you to come back and make any changes. If you go through and save it as Jeff, Husqvarna, etc., etc., you've got to do more in preparing your design to take you back to be able to make those changes. So I always save. My first copy is always in the original draw file so I can make changes. We save. So he's saved now. Then if you're sending it to your machine, you've got a couple of options depending on which one you have. So you go to, so for example, 15,000. I don't have my USB in, but you go to USB storage, it comes up here, you click on it, and you have a couple options. So depending on your machine, it'll give you different options in what you can save it into. Your JPX is, it saves like your image underneath it as well. So when you send it to your machine, you actually have the embroidery design and an image behind it. The Jeff is your traditional older style. Your Jeff Plus is the most current one that majority of the machines use, and it just retains extra information. So you send it across and then you can stitch him out. And that's pretty much how you make a basic embroidery with the built-ins. Any questions? No? Everyone's going, oh my God, what have I got myself into? Nah, it's all good. The best thing you can do is just have a play with the software. There are plenty of tutorials that are built into the software to start with. And if you start with those built-ins, as you saw, it automatically creates all your basic design features. So you're not actually having to trace designs out and things like that. So it's a good starting point with it. So any questions? Sure, no questions? No? Okay.
I think you've
So what was that, Sharon?
answered a couple that were bugging me, especially
Okay.
jump. I started playing around with that yesterday.
Yep.
The red work. So I'm going to do that cat, and then I'm going to
Yep.
convert it to red, like it
Mhm.
says.
Yep.
How? Yeah.
Yep.
That's really easy to do it like that.
Mm.
Yeah, doing it from artwork. That's another thing. I was
It
double
is.
mine, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. And that's what I mean. There's so many, like some of them you look at and you go, oh, they're not really my idea of designs, but just have a play with them. Like there's so many there that you can actually have a play with. And yeah, like I showed you, you can delete parts out of it so you don't have to keep everything there and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, it is a good starting platform. Mm.
One thing, Katrina, in the sequence manager,
Yep.
it went up, you shifted colours around then and you were putting them to. I thought, I swear in my head, with the simple cut,
Mm.
that you right click on it, you say a group of colours that you've selected, you
Mm.
could right click and say, you know, go last or stitch last or whatever like that in a whole group. Whereas this, you've got to drag it all and rearrange it that way. So, am I confused?
I don't know. I'll have to have a look. That's the way I've always done it. But yeah, no, I'll have a look whether you can actually. I knew you could do it on MBX. So in it, the old software, you could click on it and go drop it to the last position or drop it to the first position. Um, but no, I'll have to look into that one for you. Yeah.
Got MB.
Yep.
So,
Mm.
oh, anyway, yeah, it's been fun.
That's good.
I just got to stitch a few of them out. I have stitched some, but I haven't
Yeah.
stitched them all.
And honestly, that is the key, is to stitch them out because you're not going to see. It's that standard of what you see on your computer is not always what you see when you stitch it out or in real life. So yeah, you got to stitch it out. You might stitch it out and go, oh, like for example, if I just zoom in, so you can see here, sort of with his cheeks and chin and that, the stitches are flowing that way across the screen. You might find that when you stitch that out, that oh, I just don't like that. Well, you can change it. Or you might find that a bit more advanced is, oh, I don't like that design of fill. Well, I can go in and change that to a different fill stitch and things like that. So, yeah, stitching it out, you really got to stitch it out so you can see how it comes out. And once again, all machines are different. So, so for example, the 15,000 and the 11,000 work on a different, slightly different carriage system. So not so much with this software, but other and older softwares, your stitch angle would actually play effect into regards to which machine you were using. So if you had say a stitch angle for on a design that you created for your 11,000 and say it was 39 degrees, the stitch angle, when you brought it to the 15,000, sometimes that if you had it still on that same degree angle, you might have got a few bubbles in your stitches. So your tension was slightly out. So then you had to change your angle on it. Whereas with this one, they've taken a lot of that out of that guesswork out of it. So when we refer to it being like an auto feature or a consumer friendly, that's what we're talking about. They've taken all that nitty gritty out of it that you guys don't have to worry about anymore. But yeah, so it is. It's sort of, we're just scratching the surface of it.
I like the stitch flow feature in it. That's but I didn't. I was fiddling around with that too, and I liked how you did all the different lines because I did a couple, and I thought, must be doing something wrong. But now I can see how it's done properly.
That's okay. So yeah. So yeah, I know there is a lot of information to take in, but yeah, just work through it at your own pace and go from there. So yeah. So if there's no other questions, yeah, I'll process this through and hopefully get to see the internet's dropping out today. So hopefully I should be able to have it up as soon as possible. Um, and I'll send out a copy of the notes to go with it as well. So yeah. Okay then.
Thank you.
That's okay.
I got to go play now. I was going to go and stitch my towel topper out, but I want to do this while it's fresh in my mind.
Yep.
Righty.
Okay then.